What is going on, everyone? So in this video, we're going to be doing some very, very important stuff, exciting stuff. So you might know, at the Drone Dojo, we're big fans of Raspberry Pi drones. For good reason, right? You can control a drone with Python. That's just one of the many reasons, right? But you might also know that to this point, we have only showed you how to make a Raspberry Pi drone with the Navio flight controller shield. Now there are a lot of good things about this particular device, you know, it just plops on there. You got a flyable Raspberry Pi drone. A lot of downsides though. It's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more. It's like 200 bucks, so it's pretty expensive for this flight controller. It's also a Linux-based flight controller, which means it's not as dependable as your typical microcontroller-based flight controller. So, in this video, we've had a lot of requests for this. We are going to show you how to set up, are you ready? Are you ready? Set up the Pixhawk flight controller with the Raspberry Pi to have a Pixhawk-based Raspberry Pi drone. All right. This is pretty awesome because the Pixhawk is a very well-supported device. It's been around for a while, but it still works really, really good. It is a microcontroller-based flight controller, much, much cheaper than the Navio, and it's a lot more dependable. So in this video, we're going to show you how to set up a Raspberry Pi drone with the Pixhawk. We'll walk you through the hardware setup, you know, how to place it on the drone, how to get that orientation right. Then we're going to jump into the firmware. There's some things on the Raspberry Pi we have to set up. There's some things on the Pixhawk we have to set up. Then we'll do that. Then we'll install all of our dependencies we need on the Raspberry Pi in order to control the Pixhawk from the Raspberry Pi. Then, after all that's done, we jump into the fun stuff, which is actually controlling the Pixhawk from the Raspberry Pi. So we'll write a very simple script just to show you that we can indeed control the drone through Python scripting from the Raspberry Pi. So let's jump into it. So I was told to look more human, that I should be blinking in my videos, but they didn't tell me I had to blink with both eyes. I just rewatched the intro and I did a lot of this action right here with the other eye just chilling. He's just chilling. So just want to let you know that I can in fact blink with both eyes. Everything is all right. Now we can continue. We're going to show you how you can mount the flight controller and the Raspberry Pi to the top plate while getting rid of those vibrations. And we're going to do that by installing a vibration dampening plate. So, what is that? This is going to be fixed to the top plate of the drone frame with normal sticky tape. But here you'll notice there are little holes there, 8 holes at each corner of the plate. And with those holes, we're going to put in these rubber little vibration dampening absorbers. Okay, so we'll put one of those vibration dampening little guys in one of those holes. Okay. And there is one of those. You'll see on the back side that it is totally in there. And we will put these vibration dampening little guys in each one of these holes. All right. And then when you are done with that, the bottom part of the vibration dampening plates should look something like that. But we have this other piece here, and this is going to be what the Raspberry Pi and flight controller are fixed to. And you'll notice that there are 8 little holes on this side of the vibration dampening mechanism, and the Raspberry Pi is actually going to be fixed to this top plate, so it'll be isolated from vibrations because those will be picked up by those blue pads. But first we have to attach these 8 blue vibration dampeners to this plate. And this is much easier to do before you have fixed your bottom plate of the vibration dampening mechanism to your plate of the drone frame. So highly advise you to do this without it already taped to the drone frame.
6 hours later.
All right, then you will finish with 2 connected plates like this, with the connection being the vibration dampeners. You'll notice there are 4 little screw holes here. Those perfectly align with the mounting points on the Raspberry Pi. So what we're going to do is align the Raspberry Pi with that plate, flip it upside down, and now we are going to screw in these, which I believe are 2.5 millimeter diameter screws, with these 11 millimeter spacers. So let's take one of those screws and place it through the hole. We'll flip it. And what we're going to do is just screw in that spacer. And we need this spacer on top of the Raspberry Pi because once we have the 4 fixed in place, we're going to mount our flight controller on top of that. Okay, let's do that 4 more times. And there we go. We have the 4 11 millimeter standoffs installed now on the Raspberry Pi. So now the last thing we have to do is install this entire unit to the top plate of the drone itself. So we're going to put some sticky tape here on the bottom of the vibration dampening system. All right, now we just need to fix this to the plate of the drone now. And you want to get it pretty centered in the middle. You don't have to, get it extremely perfect and obsess over it for days, but you want to get it to be decently centered. Once you're happy with that, go ahead and press down on that bottom plate. And there we go. Now we have mounted our Raspberry Pi to the top plate of the drone, and our flight controller is going to be isolated from vibrations. So this is the way you want to do it. Now it's time to install the Pixhawk to this system. So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to have this 3D printable part right there, and this is going to be what we mount the Pixhawk to. So we installed these standoffs previously, these 4 standoffs, and those perfectly correlate with the holes on this mount. So now we just need to take 4 of these little screws. This should be 2.5 millimeter screws, and take a little screwdriver. We're just going to lock this down. Here's a closer look real quick. So we have 1 screw started. I wouldn't lock that first one down all the way. I'd just get it into socket and then get the other 3, and then we can begin to lock it down. And here we are. Now we have a nice little platform that we can fix the Pixhawk to. And you'll also notice that we have these pin headers of the Raspberry Pi still exposed, which is good because that is going to be how we connect the Pixhawk to the Raspberry Pi. Okay, now it's time to fix the Pixhawk to that platform. You'll see on the Pixhawk we have an arrow pointed this way, and that indicates the direction of the drone. So we want the arrow to be pointing at the USB ports of the Raspberry Pi. And we want to make sure that the Pixhawk is not covering up those pin headers because, again, we need access to those. So make sure it's pretty well centered. And we're going to apply some sticky tape to the Pixhawk. We'll take off that protective layer. Now we're going to actually mount it. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty well centered. You want it as close to the USBs as possible.
Keep those pin headers exposed. And then maybe just kind of lightly drop it on there and see if you like it. If you like that, then you can press down harder on the platform and it'll be fixed. If you need to adjust it, then just lift it up and try that again. I am pretty happy with that actually, so I'm going to go ahead and press down on the Pixhawk and that top platform. And there we go. We have our system now. Here is a side view. Here's the frame of the drone. Here is the vibration dampening plates that we installed. Then we have the Raspberry Pi. We have the top platform, and then here's our Pixhawk. Okay, so now we are actually going to make a connection between the Pixhawk and the Raspberry Pi, and that is so the Raspberry Pi will be able to send commands to the Pixhawk, which will then control the movement of the drone. So what are we going to need to be able to do that? Well, we're going to need a special type of cord here. On this end, this is the Pixhawk end, we have a 6-pin DF13 connector. And then on the other end, we're going to have those 6 female DuPont connectors. And those are going to plug into the pin out of the Raspberry Pi. Go ahead and install the Pixhawk end of the connector. It's going to plug that into the telemetry port number 2. There we go. Now we need to connect the DuPont, or the female DuPont side, to the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so the red pin is going to go into that second pin on the first column. Just like that. And then the next pin is the ground, so grab the black cable and we'll plug that in. There we go, that'll be the third pin. Just like that. And then the next pin on the Raspberry Pi, that has to be TX. So we need to plug in the RX from the Pixhawk. The RX on the Pixhawk is that blue wire. So we're going to plug that blue wire into the next pin on the Raspberry Pi. And then that last one is going to be RX on the Raspberry Pi. So we need to plug the TX from the Pixhawk into that slot, which is the white cable. And the last thing I would do is just get some super glue or something and just tack those all together, and that'll make it a more sturdy connection. It might be easy for one of those wires to get off of the pin header of the Raspberry Pi, but more difficult for all of them to come off. So that'll just make it more secure, so you make sure that you always have a good UART connection.
All right, now we need to install Mission Planner. If you don't already have that installed, head on over to this URL, and this is where you will be able to download the latest version. So go ahead and click on that, and that will begin the download. That'll be a .msi file that you can just double click on and step through the installation process. After that is completed, go ahead and launch up Mission Planner. We are going to flash the ArduCopter firmware to the Pixhawk. So we're going to open up Mission Planner and then hop on over to the setup section and then click on install firmware. Now we're going to hit all options, version type. This is essentially what version of ArduPilot do we want to use. Now, one thing to be aware of, like ArduPlane goes up to 4.0.7 currently, as you can see on this screen, 4.0.7, but ArduCopter only goes up to 4.0.5. So if you want the latest version of the
ArduPilot firmware for your particular vehicle type. Just make sure that you pick the one that is listed here. So we are going to select 4.0.5 for the copter. Our platform, this is going to be what type of flight controller we are using. We are using the Pixhawk 1, and then the version, select that version, and firmware. Select the .apj file, and then you are going to hit upload firmware after you have plugged in your Pixhawk flight controller to the computer via the micro USB cable. Okay, so, and you want to be disconnected. So with your Pixhawk plugged in, powered up, blinking, but not connected to Mission Planner, hit upload firmware. And then we're first downloading the firmware from the internet, looking for the heartbeat. So now it says unplug the board and then hit OK. So I'm going to unplug the board, plug it back in after I hit OK. Board is now unplugged, so I will hit OK, and I have plugged back in the power cable from the micro USB cable to the Pixhawk. And you can see now it is starting the process of updating the firmware. So we're erasing the previous version, and now we are flashing the new firmware to our Pixhawk. And one more thing to note, at this point you do want to have a micro USB, or not, you need a micro SD card plugged into your Pixhawk. That will be towards the front of the Pixhawk. Basically, you know, any size above 4 gigabytes will work. And then once that has completed, we can go over here, look at the COM ports, and we'll select COM port 6, and we'll connect. This will connect our drone to Mission Planner. Here we go, we're getting all the parameters. And remember, we flashed version 4.0.5 to our Pixhawk, so when we look in the messages, in the message section of Mission Planner, we should see that that is the version we are using. Okay, so we'll go over to Data, scroll over to Messages, and there we go. We are using ArduCopter version 4.0.5. All right, now we're going to set up our Raspberry Pi SD card. So we need to flash an image to that so that we have an operating system. So get you a little SD card like that and a USB converter so that we can plug that into the computer. It'll just be like that. There you go. Now we're going to head on over to raspberrypi.org/software/operating systems. And we want to download the OS Lite version, the latest one. We don't need the desktop. We need to have the headless Lite version. So go ahead and click download there. That'll take a little bit of time. After that's completed though, go ahead and hit extract all. And then that will bring us to the actual image that we will be flashing to that micro SD card. That'll end with .img. So now we have the operating system we're going to be using on the Raspberry Pi. Now we need to download some software that we will be able to flash with. So we're going to use Etcher for that purpose. So go ahead and type Etcher download. And you can download Etcher or Balena Etcher, whatever your preference is. Just go ahead and hit download now and then boot up. It'll look like this. So in the middle, you have the device you want to flash to. So we just plugged in our SD card to the computer. So go ahead and select that drive. That's what we'll be flashing to. And then after we select that, we select the image that we want to flash to that SD card. So what we just downloaded, we will be selecting there. Then after both of those are selected, we will just hit flash, and it will flash that image to that SD card. And that'll take maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes. Then after that is done flashing, let's go ahead and open up the boot drive of what we just flashed. And we are going to set up the internet now. So go ahead and look for a file. It might be there, it might not. wpa_supplicant.conf. If it's not there, go ahead and create it. But we're going to open that now with our text editor of choice, Notepad++. And here we're just going to type in the SSID, that is the Wi-Fi name, and then we're going to type in PSK equals, and then whatever our password is for that network, and we'll save that and go ahead and exit out. Now we need to download an SSH client, which will allow us to actually remotely log into the Raspberry Pi. So go ahead and go to putty.org and just simply download that. Now we need to eject that SD card from the computer, and let's plug it into the Raspberry Pi, and we are going to boot up with that. There you go. Now let's open up our Putty client that we just downloaded, and we're going to now SSH into it just to make sure that we can connect. So you can log in with either the IP address, which I'm doing in the video here, or you can also log in and type pi@raspberrypi.local into that host name section of Putty. And then port is 22. Make sure SSH is selected. Then we'll hit open. Then it'll prompt us to log in. We will type pi for that. Then it'll prompt the password. That password is always going to be Raspberry. And then we are logged in. All right, so now we are SSH'd into our Raspberry Pi. We're going to install all the things. All right, so we're going to start with a sudo apt-get update. And you need to put the G when you spell get. That's very crucial. Now we'll run a sudo apt-get upgrade. And this will take a little bit of time, so just sit tight and be patient. All right, and that'll take about 5 minutes. Now we're going to install the very important Python pip package that'll allow us to install Python packages. So we'll type sudo apt-get install python-pip, and that won't take nearly as long. Hit the Y and then hit enter. And after we're done installing Python pip, let's go ahead and do Python dev. Sudo apt-get install python-dev. And after we're done installing Python pip, we'll run this command right here. Paste that on over. All right, then once that's done, let's go ahead and start using the pip Python package handler. We'll type sudo pip install future and PySerial. Then we're going to run sudo pip install, and we're going to install two really cool packages that actually allow us to control the drone via the Raspberry Pi. And that'll be drone kit and mavproxy. Mavproxy will be able to control the drone through the command line of the Raspberry Pi, and drone kit will be able to fly the drone with actual Python scripting. So these are two really cool Python packages. All right, then once that finishes installing, we should have all of our dependencies that we need and all of our packages we need to control the drone via the Raspberry Pi that we have installed. And we have also hooked up the hardware to allow the Raspberry Pi and the Pixhawk to have a bridge to be able to communicate with each other. We did that via the UART to the telemetry port. But now we have to set up the Raspberry Pi to allow that communication on that UART. So we have to do a few things there. First thing, we'll type sudo raspi config. Okay, then we're going to go to interface options and then serial port. So would you like a login shell to be accessible over serial? We'll say no. Get that crap out of here. Now, would you like the serial port hardware to be enabled? Yeah, because we need to talk with the Pixhawk, okay? Raspi config, don't give me that back talk, okay? We'll hit yes there, and we'll hit okay. So we finished the first thing we have to do. And would you like to reboot now? No, I would not, Raspi config. We'll do that later. Now, so there's a Bluetooth device on your Raspberry Pi that automatically is using the UART. So, and that should be /dev/ttyama0. So let's type that command, and there it is. So we want to disable that Bluetooth because we want to use this UART device. So how do we do that? We say sudo nano /boot/config.txt. Okay. And we'll go to the bottom of the file. And I'm sorry if I offended anyone by not using the VI text editor. My apologies. And how we're going to disable the Bluetooth, we're going to say DT overlay equals disable -BT, stands for Bluetooth. And if we don't have enable _UART equal to 1 already, go ahead and type that here. Then we'll hit the control button on our keyboard and X. Let's save that. Now let's go ahead and reboot. Sudo reboot. There she is. And we are back. We are back. So now we have all our dependencies set up. We should be able to communicate with the Pixhawk from the Raspberry Pi. This shell is for the Raspberry Pi. So let's see if we can actually talk with the Pixhawk. And if we can talk with the Pixhawk, that means we can actually control the drone, which is pretty freaking sweet. We're going to say mavproxy.pi --master. Now this is the device that we are going to be using to communicate with the Pixhawk. And we know that for us on a Pixhawk is going to be /dev/ttyama0. So let's hit enter there. And look at this. We are connected to the Pixhawk. It is telling us that we have ArduCopter version 4.0.5. We are currently in stabilize mode. And just to prove to you that we can control the drone, let's change the flight mode. It's right now in stabilized flight mode. Let's change that to guided flight mode. And there we go. We are now in guided flight mode. Now, if I want to get really fancy, I could type arm, oh, come on. I could type arm throttle. Don't do that unless you are prepared to have the motor start spinning, because that is what will happen if you type arm throttle and everything is good to go. So that confirms that we have set up everything correctly. The dependencies are set up correctly. The packages, we have all the right packages. Our hardware is set up correctly. We have that UART to Pixhawk connector bridge set up correctly. We're good to go. So if we were able to do that, we know that we can control the drone with DroneKit now. Okay, so let's write that script. We're going to type VI and then arm_test.py, and then we'll hit enter there. Now the first thing we want to do is import some dependencies into this script. So we're going to start importing from DroneKit, which we already downloaded previously in this video. And from that DroneKit package, we're going to import a bunch of functions. Then we're going to import some other things like time, math, and argparse, which will allow us to take input into this script. Now let's define a couple functions. The first one we're going to write is going to be connect my copter. We're going to use this to connect this Python script to the drone's firmware. That way we can control the drone from the script. Now the first thing we're going to do is define an argparse argument, and that is what is going to allow us to feed in input to this script. And we're defining that input option as --connect. So we start the script and we say --connect, then we will feed in the device that we're using to connect to the Pixhawk. So in our case, it's going to be /dev/ttyama0. On a Navio drone, that would be different. So then we capture that connect argument under args.connect and save that to the connection string variable that we're defining here. And now let's define the baud rate at 57,600. Now we have everything we need to connect this script to the drone, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll create a variable called vehicle, and we'll use the connect function from the DroneKit package. And first we're going to feed in the connection string, then the baud rate, and then wait ready equals true. That just means that the script will not progress until there is a connection to the drone. And then we're going to return that vehicle object to whatever variable called this function. That's the first function. Next function we're going to create is going to be to arm the drone's motors. That just means they're going to start spinning for a few seconds. So it's going to say, we're going to create that as def arm. Now we're going to say while vehicle is armable is equal to false, which means that there is a problem with the drone, so we cannot arm the drone's motors. We're going to print out to the console, waiting for vehicle to become armable. Then we'll sleep for a second. So that'll just keep looping over and over until we can arm the drone. Then after we progress past this while block, we know that the drone is now armable. So that's equal to true. So we'll print out, yo, vehicle's now armable, bruh. And then we'll print out a space here. And then we are going to actually arm the drone. So we'll say vehicle.armed equals true. So we're setting that variable as true. So that is going to start spinning the motors. Then we'll say while vehicle.armed is equal to false, which means that that command has not been accepted yet. We're just going to loop for a little bit in the while block. We'll say waiting for drone to become armed. Then we'll sleep for a second. Then once we break out of that while block, we know the vehicle is now actually armed. So we'll say vehicle is now armed, and we'll print also OMG, the props are spinning, look out. All right, so then we'll say return none, because we don't need to return anything to whatever variable called this function. Now, let's actually write up the main executable portion of this script. It's going to be very simple. Just going to say vehicle equals connect to my copter. So that's the first function that we wrote. Then we're just going to say arm in the parentheses. So we're going to arm the drone. And that's it. So then we'll just say end of script. And we will save this. We'll hit the colon and then a WQ. Now we can actually try this script out. So I would make sure that either your props are off or your drone is in a position where when the props start spinning, it won't hit anything because your motors are going to start spinning. So let's say Python arm test.py, the name of our script, and then we're using that argparse argument that we wrote, so -- connect, and we're going to feed in the device that we're using to communicate from the Raspberry Pi to the Pixhawk, so /dev/ttyama0, and we'll hit enter there, and here's our drone, and there we go. The props are now spinning, so the Python script was able to actually command those motors to start spinning. So that might be a light bulb moment for some of you. From the Raspberry Pi, we commanded the Pixhawk to command the motors to spin. That is why the Raspberry Pi Pixhawk combination is so powerful. We can actually control the drone from the Raspberry Pi.
All right, so now we know all about how to set up our Raspberry Pi Pixhawk drone. Now, if you liked this video, everyone says, you gotta smash that like button, you gotta smash that subscribe button. There's no smashing, we don't have to smash. You gotta do that, just gently tap the like button, gently tap the subscribe button. And if you want to give me some suggestions for our next video at the Drone Dojo, leave your comment below and I will read through all of those. Now, if you want to build this drone that we built in this video, go ahead and check maybe to the link over here or in the video description below. We will have a link to all of the parts you will need to build this Pixhawk Raspberry Pi drone. I think there's something like 40 or so different parts you need to build this drone. So at this link, you'll be able to get all of the parts without having to go through the lengthy and headache-inducing process of having to find all of the parts that will work together. And they might not even work. But at this link, you know all of the parts will work together and you can build this drone. A lot of people have made some pretty crazy things from this drone we built. We've had one person who built a drone fishing application, not even joking, off of this drone. We've had others make drone delivery missions, autonomous drone delivery missions, slap some food on there, deliver it to your friend. We've had others slap a camera on the drone and do some computer vision based flying, so the camera is influencing the flight of the drone. So this drone really is capable of a lot of things, and if you have a particular idea in mind and you want to bring it out into the real world, this drone really is the ultimate project drone to get your ideas prototyped. Now maybe you want to learn a little bit more about the Python drone kit coding side of things. Well, if that's the case, check out this video over here, and that'll link you to a video that shows you how to develop an autonomous drone kit mission that'll raise the drone into the air at a target altitude and simply land it. Now this is basic drone kit stuff. You can do way more complex things than that, but that'll give you a really good starting point. If you want to see some more advanced drone kit missions, check out this video up here, where with the same drone we built in this video, we developed an autonomous drone delivery mission. We slap a taco at the back of Buster the drone, and he flies from the home waypoint to the taco waypoint, lands, drops off the taco, and flies home. All with Python drone kit. So this drone really is capable of a lot. I hope you're starting to see some of that potential and you're starting to get a little bit excited. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and I will answer those, and I will see you next time.